Okay, today chapter 11 of the Miriam's book. Anna completed chapter 10 very nicely last month. Today you have Sematology and Typtology. Most of it had already been presented to us when we study physical phenomena. Kardec, in order to be complete, breakdowns all the different types of mediumship, and he could not leave one or another type behind in order to be complete. Sematology is basically the studies of signs, the study of reps. And typtology is basically the study of knockings, something like a Morse code, right? It is tick, 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 tuk, 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 and then the sequence of knockings, it spells words, it communicates. How is it relevant for us today? I think that's the major question. Today we have psychography that is much faster, much efficient, and this kind of communications are not really used that much. So to us it has, I would say, three things of good. One, the study of history of the doctrine, how it start, how the spirits were able to call our attention and then progress to something more eloquent, such as psychography. Two, it's not completely extinguished. The fact that today we have much more efficient means of communication doesn't mean that less efficient means of communication are extinguished. It still may exist. Physical phenomena always exist and it always exist. So it may be, and then will be my number three, something for you to know, because it may happen to any one of us, and we may be able to recognize it. That we may be exposed to spirits trying to communicate with us through one of those phenomena. And it's good to know. How likely is that to happen? Not very likely. But we know cases that it has happened to people that you had the opportunity to speak about it. It's very straightforward, the reading, so maybe I think you should be able to finish that chapter with a lot of reading and very little explanation, because there isn't that much explanation. So please, this is a study group. Any questions, anything, bring up a question, put up your hands, because there is no need to leave this chapter behind with any questions, because it's quite simple in itself. Okay? Go Zoraida, please.
Okay, yes. Sematology and Typtology, the language of signals and raps, alphabetical typology. 139. The earliest intelligent manifestations were expressed by means of raps or typology. This primitive method, restricted by the initial conditions of the process, offered only very little usefulness. Consequently, communications received in this manner were at first limited to monosyllable yes and no responses through a predetermined number of raps. As we have stated, however, the method was later improved upon. Raps are produced by two procedures through special mediums, and in order for this method to work, an aptitude for physical manifestation is usually required. The first procedure, which may be called seesaw typology, consists in the movement of a table which rises to one side and then drops to strike with the formerly upraised leg. All that is required of the mediums in this case is for them to rest their hands on the edge of the table. If they want to converse with a particular spirit, an evocation is required. If not, the first spirit to arrive or the one who habitually comes manifests itself. For example, having agreed that one strike means yes and two means no, the number does not matter. Questions are then asked of the spirit later. We will see which questions we should refrain from asking. The problem is the briefness of the answers and the difficulty in formulating the question so that the answer can be either yes or no. Suppose we want to ask the spirit, what do you want? If it can only respond with one word, so we would have to ask, do you want this? No. That? Yes. And so on.
Okay, thanks.
Hmm.
So again, the definitions that we given already: sematology, study of signs or raps; typtology, the study of knockings. And here Kardec displayed to us a evolutionary process that he experienced, being very methodically using scientific methodology, describes all the progress that we had, the spiritists had, in using the mediumship from a less efficient as sematology and typtology to a more eloquent, as now we use frequently, psychography. And it says the earliest intelligent manifestation. And then when somebody may call, oh, but I thought this was physical phenomena. This requires a medium of physical phenomena providing ectoplasm for the phenomena to take place. Indeed, typtology, sematology is a physical phenomena. It's spirits utilizing ectoplasm in combination with the thoughts of the medium and the thoughts of the spirit itself. They are able to produce this phenomena, and it's called a physical phenomena because it affects our physical senses. Everybody here, the tips, everybody here, the knocks, everybody hears the noise that's coming from inside of the wood, being or not being a medium. Therefore, it's a physical phenomenon because it addresses our physical senses. It addresses our eyes, it addresses our ears, physical ears, physical eyes. But it's also intelligent because it conveys an intelligent process. A very simple example, let's say our dogs, our pets in the house. If the dog moves towards the door, looks at you and looks at the door, giving a sign that he needs to go out to use the potty over there to urinate or anything, there is an intelligence behind that. He learned that by doing that, it will call the attention of the owner, and the owner will intelligently recognize that the dog is asking to go out. Therefore, there is an intelligence in there. And all the communications that Kardec worked with were intelligent in a sense that the spirits were start to convey an intelligent process, a communication which requires a degree of intelligence. If it was just reps, meaningless reps that produces nothing, then you're not called intelligent. But if the rep produces answers to intelligent questions, being it yes or no, then it's intelligent. Okay? So it is a physical phenomenon, but it's also intelligent in a sense that it's not just random noises. It's noises trying to express something intelligent. Okay, and basically describe the difficulties of it in the beginning, that in order to communicate through this method in the beginning, the only thing that spirits could answer is yes or no by prearranged number of noise. 2 taps, it's yes, 1, it's no, and so forth and so forth. The difficulty of that is that you have now to ask questions that could be answered with yes or no. Because if you would question in which country did you live in your last reincarnation? There is no way to the spirit to answer it yes or no. Then you'd have to ask, was it in England? Yes or no? Was it France? Yes or no? Was it Germany? Yes or no? So you can see that it could be extremely lengthy to go to have a communication that requires more than a yes or no. You, as the dialogue in the case one speaking with the spirit, we do have to have some skills to formulate those questions in a way that minimize time consumption, which can be very tricky when all the spirits can do is yes or no. Kardec says over here of type of seesaw typology, which basically the movements of tables that rises on one side and then drops on the other side. So if its right side goes up and goes down to make noise against the floor. Basically, that's what it is. Okay, and it says over here that all that requires of the mediums in plural, in this case, is for them to rest their hands on the edge of the table. I question myself the plural mediums, and I myself thinking, trying to see, well, there was more than one medium, or perhaps there was not more than one medium, or perhaps they didn't know who was the medium. Again, the medium doesn't come with bright neon lights on their forehead. I am the medium here. So several individuals would do that. One of them would be a medium of physical phenomena. One of them would be the provider of the ectoplasm. Perhaps they didn't know exactly who was. Therefore, you put several individuals up there for it to work. Because we know there is not a need of more than one medium in general to provide such a simple kind of phenomena. And then we recognize later on that the hands on the table is not even is necessary. So what we see here, the evolution that goes to limit to less and less and less, use the material part of the side. Now, all that the medium of physical phenomena needs is to provide their energies, the ectoplasm, and they, with the spirits, will use their thoughts also as energy. In combination, their own thoughts to perform the phenomena. But not even the hands on the edge of the table is really necessary. And we see here that with this method, in order to get even a sentence written or collected, would be quite an exercise. Questions? Okay, 140.
Okay. It is interesting to note that in employing this method, the spirit normally adds a sort of mimicry. That is, it expresses how emphatic the affirmation or negation is through the force of the strikes. It may also express the nature of the sentiments that prompt it, violence by rough movements, or anger and impatience by strong repeated raps, like someone tapping his or her foot with anger, to the point of even smashing the table leg to the floor. However, if it is a kind and gentle spirit, At the end of the session, it will incline the table as if waving goodbye. If the spirit wants to address one of the participants directly, it will raise the table toward him or her either smoothly or violently, depending on whether it wants to display affection or hostility. Properly speaking, this is a semantics art or sign language. But typtology is the language of raps. Here is a notable example of the spontaneous use of semantics, who knew of a gentleman who was in his living room one day where several persons were involved in spirit manifestations when he received one of our letters. While he was reading it, the small table that was being used for the experiments suddenly moved toward him. When he had finished reading the letter, he went to place it on a table at the other end of the room. The small table followed him and directed it toward where he had deposited the letter. Surprised at the coincidence, he thought there might be some relation between movement and the letter. So he asked the spirit, who responded that it was one of our Kardec's familiar spirits. When the gentleman informed us of what had happened, he asked the spirit about its reason for the visit that he had made. It responded, "It is natural that I visit the persons with whom you maintain relations so that I can provide you with them both, if necessary, any needed advice." It is obvious that the spirit wanted to call the man's attention to the fact that it was there, and it has sought an opportunity to do so. A mute person could not have done any better.
Thank you.
Okay.
So two things of note in this passage is, one, that the spirits were able to display their emotions and intelligence even through this very archaic method of communication, just by raps, just by making noise. And they could do that by the force into which they would make that noise, the force they use to hit the table against the floor or any other thing they were using. That they could show the impatience, if things were taking too long, they would do the movement with extreme velocity and in rapidity, saying, let's move on with this thing, kind of thing. So they were able to even display their emotions in the intelligence, even to this method. And it's an affirmation. It's a confirmation that it's really an intelligent source behind of the phenomena. It's really a human being without a flesh behind the phenomena to be able to express these emotions, these sentiments through their raps. And another thing of interesting here is the example used by Kardec on how in the beginning of the works of Kardec, there was an extension of assistance during this process of the codification. And we wonder if it does not continue to these days to those who are doing good work for the doctrine. Because one of the spirits that will be by the side of Kardec, assisting Kardec, would also go through the homes of those who receive letters from Kardec to see if they also need assistance. I think that's a very good example of how this assistance in this process was really extended beyond the nucleus, but it's spread to its margins everywhere that the doctrine was going. The spirits associated with the codification would follow those extensions, even to the house of individuals who was receiving letters of Kardec. I think this is wonderful, and could not stop but thinking that if it does not continue today with individuals who are doing good work in favor of this doctrine, which is in favor of Jesus Christ. Questions, comment?
I have a question.
Please.
A while back, I had the opportunity to observe a meeting where yes and no were written on separate pieces of paper and placed in a glass. And the medium would ask questions to the spirits, and the medium would pick an answer from the glass, either yes or no, after asking the question. What I wanted to know is whether this method of communication can be considered to be an actual spirit communication, or perhaps it was just animism.
Ebony, it could really be both. I think this method, the way you explained and if you understood correct, there were several yes and no's in a jar, or there is only one yes and one no?
I'm sorry, one yes and one no.
One yes and one no. Okay. And all the questions were coming from whom?
The questions were asked by the medium. The evocation was made, and there was confirmation that the spirits had arrived. And so the medium proceeded to ask questions. And there was a pause, and then the medium would pick from the glass either whatever response, either yes or no, and would read out the response to everybody present.
And the same medium who put up the questions is one to bring up the yes or no.
Yes.
Yeah. Listen, we cannot say for sure, right? There is a true communication of there is animism or even if it's fraud. I'm sorry to say. But I think this method opens room for a lot of suspicion, for a lot of questions. I could not say for sure if that was the case. And I think only all the mediums present in there, as a seeing medium, so to say, a seeing medium would be able to see if those are the spirits or the spirit was providing those answers or not, right? But I think this method creates a lot of suspicions. I personally would be very suspicious of it.
Okay.
But having said that, I cannot say that there was not a true communication. I have no means to really say that. But I think all the techniques that opens a lot of rooms to a lot of question and great probability or possibility, I'm sorry, not probability or possibility of animism or even fraud, I should be avoided in my opinion.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, 141.
Okay. It did not take long for the typology to be improved upon and to be enriched with a more complete form of communication, that is alphabetically typology, which consists in the indication of letters by means of raps. It was then possible to receive words, sentences, and even entire discourses. Depending on the method employed, the table strikes as many raps as necessary to indicate each letter. That is, one strike for A, two for B, and so on, while someone records the letters indicated. The spirit indicates when the process is finished by means of a predetermined signal. It is easy to see that this procedure is very slow and requires quite some time for the longest communications. Nevertheless, there were persons who were patient enough to use it in order to obtain several pages. This practice, however, led to the discovery of shortcuts that allowed the work to proceed faster. The one most commonly employed consists in having in front of the mediums the alphabet and a series of numbers indicating units. While one medium is at the table, another points to the letters if they want to obtain words, or to the numbers if they want a number. When the second person reaches the letter needed, the table strikes a rap and the experimenter writes the letter. This procedure is repeated for the second, third, and following letters. If there is a mistake, the spirit warns the mediums by making the table strike or move, and they then start over. This procedure becomes quite rapid with practice. By guessing the word which has just started to form according to the context, the communication procedure can be shortened. If there is any doubt, the spirit is consulted, who then responds by yes or no.
Okay. So here we witness a good amount of progress from only being able to answer yes or no. Now the spirits could answer with basically any other words, but in a very slow process using the so-called alphabetic typology. 1 for A, 2 for B, 3 for C. No, 1 rep, 2 reps, 3 reps, 1 knock, 2 knocks, 3 knocks, so any kind of noise. So, and the same thing for numbers. 1 for 1, 2 for 2, 3 for 3, and so forth and so on. So if you want to spell, let's say, Abba, would be 1, short pause. It would be 1, pause, B, pause, B, pause, 1. So say A, B, B, A, Abba, right? If I have to say which year did you die, and it was 1857, it would be like for 1 knocks, 8 knocks, 5 knocks, 7 knocks, right? We can see that things is an improvement, but it could take a long time, even to say one word. But with practice, as Kardec says here, they could speed it up, do it rapidly with someone writing those letters very quickly, and the spirits being also fluent on the technique. They could do those raps rather quickly, and but it still would take tremendous amount of time. And Kardec says over here that it is to see that this procedure is very slow and requires quite some time for the longest communications. Nevertheless, there was persons who were patient enough to use it in order to obtain several pages. Now, not only patience, but immense amount of devotion, and between us, good amount of free time. Someone who would have the opportunity to dedicate themselves to this kind of phenomenon. And when I'm reading this here, it comes to my mind the exercise, the energy required for the medium performing those kind of phenomena. The length of time that the medium would have to be in a trance, providing this energy, being an available instrument for the spirits to get several pages in this type of phenomena. So there is tremendous amount of effort, tremendous amount of dedication, tremendous amount of energy being used. And we see the dedication of these workers to get those things done. I don't think it's an easy task, although it's a simple task. I don't think it's an easy task at all. That requires tremendous amount of devotion, patience, free time, and energy consumption for it. And definitely a progress, way beyond of yes or no. Now you could get questions like, as I said, in which country are you born? Now they could spell the word France, could spell the word Germany. And they could say with ear, they could say, what is the cause of death in the last reincarnation? They'll be able to spell it. But you can see that for each one of those words would be a lot of noise, a lot of reps, a lot of tips in order to get it. But nevertheless, a progress. Questions, comment? Okay, 142.
Okay. All these effects may be obtained even more simply through raps occurring within the wood of the table itself, without any movement at all, in conformance with what we reported in the chapter on physical manifestations, number 64. This is known as internal typtology. Not all mediums are equally skilled at this latter form of communications, and some can only receive tilting table raps. However, with practice, most can manage it, and this method has a double advantage of being faster, lending itself less to someone suspecting that tilting can be attributed to voluntary pressure applied by the medium. It is true that the eternal raps can also be imitated by deceitful mediums. The best things are subject to imitation, but this proves nothing against their reality. See the chapter toward the end of this volume entitled Fraud and Trickery. Whatever improvement may be introduced into this method, it can never attain the speed and ease that writing presents, which is why it is little used nowadays. Nonetheless, it is sometimes of interest because of its phenomenological aspect, particularly for newcomers, since it has the special advantage of peremptorily proving absolute independence from the medium's own thoughts. With this method, we often receive responses that are so unexpected and surprising that one would have to be very prejudiced indeed to deny the evidence. Thus, it has been a powerful motive of conviction for many individuals. However, when this method is employed, even more than when others are employed, spirits do not like to be submitted to the caprice of the curious who want to put them to the test with questions off the subject.
Okay, so now we see one step towards progress in the communication, the speed of the communication, and very important on the reduction of the proper possibility of fraud and suspicion. And that would be by the so-called internal typtology, in which you had seen already in the chapter of physical phenomena, that the noise comes from, one would say, from the inside of the wood, so to say, without the necessity of movement. Now the tape does not need to lift up its legs and bang against the floor 3 years or go up and down twice to for no. Now you can create that noise without movement. This is a tremendous progress in terms of speed of the communication, but also step in terms of progress in avoiding the possibility of a fraud, or the possibility of someone trying to, or anemic process, as Ebony had suggested before. And I imagine, I can say for sure, that it would also be energy efficient, not requiring the amount of ectoplasm now to get to lift the table, put the table down, and all kind of to do that movement. That will be more energy efficient. So it's definitely a progress. And it minimizes the possibility of fraud. It allows more questioning of the spirit. But Kardec points out here that the serious spirits, they don't want to be placed in a position in which they have to prove themselves. They are there to assist, they are there to perform what they're there to do, and they will not be content if we have to put them through a questionnaire in which they have to prove themselves, as if they are guilty until proven innocent. They will not like that, and very often they will not participate on this kind of things. That's why because expert puts over here in the last sentence, the spirits do not like to be submitted to the caprice of the curious who wants to put them to a test with questions of the subject. They will participate, they will collaborate, they will give enough evidence of their truth, but with a limit. Once it gets into the curiosity, when it crosses that limit, that range of being normal, the spirits will take themselves off. Questions, comment? Okay, 143.
In order to better safeguard the independence of communications from the medium's own thoughts, several instruments have been invented, such as dial plates on which letters like those used in electric telegrams have been engraved, a needle which moves under the medium's influence and with the help of a conducting wire and pulley indicates the letters. We have only become familiar with such instruments through designs and descriptions published in America. Thus, we cannot determine their true worth, but it seems that their complexity would be quite inconvenient. We believe that independence from the medium is perfectly proven by internal raps, even more so by the unexpectedness of the answers than by all other material means. Moreover, disbelievers who are always predisposed to seeing pieces of string and setups will be even more inclined to distrust some sort of special mechanism than a plain table devoid of any kind of accoutrements.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you just have said here that the spirits don't want to be subject to mere curiosity and to be placed in a position they are guilty until proven innocent. And it seems that there is a group of spiritualists who seek to put spirits exactly for that. And they design all kinds of instruments, of course, of machinery to eliminate the possibility of fraud or those kinds of things, which is good in a sense, but when it goes overboard, it creates more problem than good. It creates more suspicion than anything else, like this instrument that I never seen, that is described by Kardec, that know of it by reading on American experiments in spiritualism of this machine that resembles electric telegraph with complex wirings going through letters and all kinds of things, that when things are so complex, there's so many things involved in it, it creates more suspicions than anything else. In other words, keep it simple. Keep it simple, keep it obvious that you see over there the whole process taking place. And when you start being too complex with processes that you cannot see, that it's beyond our ability to understand because it's so complex, it has a tendency to create more suspicion than eliminate suspicions. And another point very important Kardec places here is that the negationists will negate. Those who are there only with a set of mind that this is not possible, communication with the dead is all fraud, and they are ready with that set of mind, they will not accept the reality of the fact regardless. So there is no need of trying to reinvent the wheel, so to say. Individuals will be out of the box. They will be free minds, and they will make the decisions of to believe or not believe, since the evidences without prejudices. And those who come in with prejudices, unfortunately, there isn't much that we can do about. So there is no need of complicating the process as much. That's the point of Kardec here. Okay, 144.
Okay. A similar device, but one that had bad faith, can easily abuse, as we will see in the chapter on fraud, is what we will designate by the name Geraldine table, in memory of the use made of it by Madame Emilie de Giraldi during the many communications she received as medium. Although she was very bright, Madame Giraldi had the weakness of believing in spirits and their manifestations. The device consists of a small round tabletop about 18 inches in diameter that can turn freely and easily around an axle like a wheel. Letters, numbers, and the words yes and no are engraved on its surface around the edge, and in the center is a fixed pointer. The medium puts his or her fingers on the edge of the top, which spins until it stops with the desired letter in line with the pointer. The letters are written down, quickly forming words and sentences. One should note that the round tabletop does not slide around under the medium's fingers. Instead, they remain fixed in one place on the edge and follow the movement. A powerful medium could possibly manage to produce an independent movement. We believe that it is possible, but we have never witnessed it. If the experiment could be performed in this way, it would be more conclusive because it would be less open to fraud.
Okay, so this again, it's more attempts to create systems of communication, mediumship communications to use in the physical phenomenon that will speed up the process and minimize the possibility of animism and fraud. This is just one of them. And I never seen a Ouija board, but for what I have seen, to tell the truth, on TV, it resembles pretty much what it is, right? And to me, the important point here is that we have here a medium who Kardec calls are very intelligent, but would believe in everything. We need to be very careful. We need to, as Ebony places the question so properly, it's not that you go negate, you're not negationists, and it's not that you are proudful, you don't want to be fooled, but you wanted to have the truth as close to it as possible. And when we start to question things, there is a reason for it. And if you try to complicate things too much, it will generate more and more questions. And again, those who are not free spirits, free mind, those who live inside of a box full of prejudices, you can invent all kinds of machines, it's not going to help. Because the problem is not external, the problem is internal. Until people are able to liberate themselves from the atavisms, from the prejudices, from the dogmas that they live by, free themselves from them, there isn't much. No invention will change that. We still have people that deny the existence of dinosaurs because the Bible does not mention it. And again, talking about intelligent people with college degree and everything else, will deny the possibility of dinosaurs ever roaming this earth because it's not in the Bible. What can we do? What invention will you have to invent in order to change the state of mind? Personally, I don't think anything, unless, well, perhaps we create a time machine and bring them back to that time, right? And perhaps not even that. They will say they are dreaming. They will say that we drug them and they are under some chemical influence. I don't know. Okay. Questions? No? 45?
Okay. We must correct a widespread error that consists in confusing all spirits who communicate through raps with those who are specially known as rapping spirits. Typtology is a means of communication like any other and is just as worthy of being used by high order spirits as is writing and speech. All spirits, whether good or evil, can use it as well as the other means. What characterizes highly evolved spirits is the loftiness of their thought and not the instrument that they use to transmit it. They undoubtedly prefer the most convenient and rapid means, but when there is no pencil or paper available, they have no qualms about using a plain talking table. This is demonstrated by the fact that we have received communications in this way that are most sublime. If we no longer use the table, it is not because we despise it, but rather because, as a phenomenon, it has already taught us everything we needed to know and can no longer add to our convictions. Additionally, the length of the communications that we now receive requires a speed that is incompatible with typology. Hence, all the rights that communicate through raps are not rapping spirits, a designation that should be reserved for those whom we may call professional rappers. We use this means either to entertain people or else to vex others with their troublemaking, sometimes with witty exchanges, but never profound ones. It would therefore be a waste of time to ask them any questions of a certain scientific or philosophical interest because of their ignorance and inferiority. Other spirits have justifiable characterized them as the jesters and clowns of the spirit world. Nonetheless, we must add that they do not always act on their own count, but often serve as the instruments of highly evolved spirits who may want to produce material effects.
Okay, as I said, a very short chapter, and we come to the end of it. And I think the most important is Kardec left for last. Because as I said in the beginning, it's perhaps a more simple method of communication between the two spheres of our lives, the physical and the spiritual. But the fact that it's simple does not mean that it's not good. And the fact that it's simple, it does not mean that it's only used by less capable spirits or less capable mediums as well. On the contrary, a mean of communication is always good for as long as it produces the wanted effect. I remember when I took a course of communication, the first sentence that came out of the teacher's mouth is the one that stays with me forever. I think it's the only thing that I learned from that course is that every language is equally good. There is no language superior than another because they all fulfill its objective, which they allow the communication, the interaction amongst the individuals that speak that language. Languages are different, some are more complex, some have a more complicated grammar, some have a more simplified grammar, but they're equally good because they allow the communication amongst people who use that language. The same thing here with this, with the phenomenon of mediumship. They're good as long as they fulfill their objective. And the objective may be slightly different. The objective may be that I want to provide a message, but at the same time, I want to impress the audience, so to say, in this case, with their physical senses. I want to bring them the attention to me as close as possible, and I know that the only way that I can do that is if I use their physical senses more than just the intellectual senses. So I want to produce some noise, I want to produce some physical effect of visual effect. I wanted to affect their olfactory senses and produce a smell of roses. With all those things as has happened, but with an objective. And if they are able to reach that objective, it's just as good as anything else. And the reps, typtology, sematology is simple, but is effective. And again, if it's not being used very often today, doesn't mean that it may be happening today. And it's very important the Kardec puts over here that it can be an instrument in the hands of higher spirits and lower spirits. As we spoke before, the more evolved the spirits, and I say quite more evolved than the more evolved the spirits incarnating in this planet these days, okay? They have a very spiritualized bad spirits, which make it very difficult for them to associate with more dense matter such as ectoplasm. That their perispiritual makeup now are not very compatible with more dense, and I use the word dense over here because I don't have any other word, kind of matter. Their perispirit is still matter, right? But it's very etherealized matter. So they may require, or they may use less evolved spirits, but with a good intention, perhaps spirits at our level now, to associate with more dense matter. And those spirits will work with the more evolved spirits for the more evolved to provide their message, which means that they can receive very eloquent, very good messages through this method from higher spirits that utilizes spirits who can still associate to more dense matter. So we don't put down any kind of method used as long as the wanted effect, the intention of a good is produce good things. And Kardec makes a differentiation here when you use the word wrapping spirits. And the wrapping spirits, the ones who are limited to it. They more interested in the amusement and the entertainment. And all they do produces raps and not interested in really providing anything of high order, high moral content. That's where they live right now. That's where they are right now. They still progress like ourselves. And again, it may produce something of good, of calling the attention of us. And there is no reason for you to put any kind of methodology down as long as the intention of producing it is good. And although it's not very used today, it does not mean that it's extinguished. It may be happening, maybe one of us may experienced that in the past. Is there any questions in the chapter? It's quite early. I'm not going to go into pneumatology today. I'm going to get that's a longer one. And I wanted, actually it's not that long, but I want to finish it. I'm going to leave for next month. Any questions?
Elmo,
Yep.
in the beginning, you had stated that that the spirits they utilized the tappings, the wrappings, the typtology, and then moved on to the more efficient methods. does this relate in any way to the capacity of the spirit to do these things?
What I mentioned in the beginning of the codification, when the spirits needed to call our attention, they need to use a physical phenomena to call our attention. So even a spirit, let's say, of the caliber of the spirit of the group of the spirits of truth that brought the codification to us, let's say Erastus or or Socrates or any of the spirits that participate, they could not use psychography yet because it would not call our attention to it. Okay? There were not spirit mediums still well prepared to recognize that as a psychography that's not coming from their own minds, that is coming from second mind. They were not prepared to offer the psychography yet. So in order to call our attention, they have to use to impress our senses. So they would use the noises, they would use the the physical effects to call attention. Once that was reached, and we see the progress over here, it progressed very fast from the quality of the physical phenomenon, very rudimentary, yes or no, to alphabetical, until we come to the point that, okay, you guys matured enough now that you go to the next level, to the more intelligent communication, because now we feel that you don't need to impress your physical senses anymore. Okay? And that's what I meant. In the beginning, they had to use it. But having said that, we just saw over here, there is spirits we still want to use the typology. Used to be the so-called the rapping spirits that Kardec calls them over here, because they like the physical phenomenon. They like to impress us by our physical sense. They like the amusement of it. And it may be that in some parts, in some cultures, in some places, they still require to call our attention to the physical senses. But in spirits of the quality, say, of Erastus, of Socrates, they would not persist and use these methodologies, since now they have prepared mediums of psychography who could just put on a paper their thoughts. It's the most efficient, it's the faster, and the most reliable method of communication for those spirits. So there is a progress, and I think this progress is more of us incarnates one to be ready to receive the more eloquent messages. And now I'm pretty sure that in the 1800s, the spirit of truth could do a lot more, but we were not to receive. So I think it's more like in our academics progress, the teacher who is teaching fraction may know trigonometry and calculus very well, but he cannot teach the kids trigonometry and fraction and trigonometry and calculus before they learn fraction. So I think in this process they taught us fraction with this physical phenomena, and then upgrade as we are ready to upgrade, as we see the progress in this chapter here.
Well, we would still have. Do we still have wrappings going on, tappings and such, because these spirits are not up of the level of Socrates and don't have the connection to those who that can receive mediums that can receive psychography. So they're still at that level in some areas, some places that are that do that. Still under private.
Yes, the answer is yes. So let's say even in, let's say my household, that I have the intellectual understanding of this phenomena, but I lack the ostensive mediumship. But let's assume that my neighbor is a medium of physical effect, or even my wife is a medium of physical effect. I don't even know if they are or not, and they're able to produce the energy required for typtology or making raps or making noises. They may use that energy and produce noise inside my house, try to call my attention to something. Now it's up to me to pay attention to it, all right, to give it proper value and just not ignore it, right? So it's just a square on the outside making noise, and recognize that it's indeed a spirit trying to call my attention to something. It could happen, and that's why the beginner said that it's not extinguished and it still may be used and useful in some circumstances. In a place where there is no medium of intelligence effect, no, or psychophony or psychography, they may have to resource to physical effect. So even though it's simple and more cumbersome, it's not extinguished and can be very useful in some circumstances.
Elmo, in the same idea of psychography, do we have any cases of instead of people writing, that spirit writing through a medium, that a medium is typing, and do they utilize the hands in that manner?
I can't tell that I know cases of mediums who sat in front of a typing board and start typing, but I don't see why not. Especially if it's an unconscious medium who is familiar with typing, that could not sit and type instead of using pen and pencil using the board. I think it's very, very plausible, but I don't know if any medium has like written a book sitting in front of a computer and just using the board, the typing instead of using a pen or a pencil. But I don't see why not.
Elmo, can I just say something? I think Shusara once mentioned this. I raised this question to her about 10 years ago. Because I had some experience back then that was very similar to what Wayne is describing. And I told her, and she said, yeah, it's totally possible. The fact was that my communication back then was not done at a center. I just received in a meditation session that I was doing at my house. And if I remember correctly, it was from someone who had discarnated really recently and was very young. I remember, now it's coming a little bit to me, but it was from a teenager, essentially, who mentioned briefly that he didn't have the habit of writing with pen or pencil, but it was just using the computer since he was right in front of me. And I did mention to Jasada, and she said it was possible. But maybe we'll just go back to her and ask again.
No, I don't think there's need to go back to her. You mean a conscious medium who receives the thought of the spirits, or is a medium who is very conscious of his or her own mediumship, and is very capable of knowing that the thoughts that come in, it's not his or her brought from the spiritual world. It has a choice of how to put that thought into words in a piece of paper by writing or using a keyboard. Is a conscious medium makes the decision. I know these thoughts that are coming are not mine. I think this is a mediumistic phenomena. Am I going to type those thoughts instead of write down with a pen or pencil? It's very simple as that. And a medium and a spirit who is familiar with the keyboard, the spirit needs to be familiar with the keyboard, and in case of unconscious medium, may direct the medium to a keyboard and use the neurological apparatus of that medium to type his or her thoughts, instead of direct them to pick up a pen or a pencil. And we know that that we had received the electronic communications typed, but those were physical phenomena in which the message appeared typed without the hands of a medium. So a more physical phenomenon has been used, which shows that there are spirits out there that are familiar with a keyboard. What I'm saying here is that it's absolutely possible. There is no reason to imagine that the spirit could make use of a keyboard instead of a pen and pencil. But I don't know of, let's say, a book or one of those mediums who have written books or messages that had used that method yet. But it's totally possible. There is no reason for say, oh no, we cannot do that. We cannot use the keyboard. Why not? If you use a pen or pencil.
Right, but also just I'm sorry to continue on this, but there are cases clearly of writers who mentioned that they went through a mediumistic trance. They didn't use exactly those words, but what they described clearly indicates that is a mediumistic trance. I don't know if you're familiar with Fernando Pessoa, which is a Portuguese poet. A lot of his writings are considered that these days because he designed characters, and they gave past lives to these characters, these writers who wrote all these books. And more recently, Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Man, Eat, Pray, Love. There was an interview with her in NPR when the book came out that she did say that she wrote the book entirely almost in a trance, that she couldn't begin to write it, but then when she asked for inspiration, the book wrote, and she even asked for inspiration for the title of the book when it was ready to be published. I'm just, a sidebar for this conversation, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's so valid, and thank you. But I think you are just illustrating what we are saying here. Everybody's agreeing with you. Nobody is denying the possibility of a spirit making use of keyboard instead of a pen and pencil. It's just another means of putting their thoughts in writing, being using pen, pencil, or a keyboard. Totally possible, and I think it's being used more than we know of it. The only thing that I'm saying that in the spiritualist literature, I don't know of any medium who can say, I wrote this book on a keyboard.
Right.
That's all that I'm saying.
Elmo, now I'm thinking about it. I think the use of a keyboard, a computer, it opens up the idea of fraud more. It's not a direct from spirit to person. There's something in between now that is can be tampered with. I can imagine now with AI, might say to it, write me something in a spiritual manner about something, and so I would imagine, or it just leaves open to doubt that something written through a keyboard, a computer, would be true. Just hearing all these
Uh,
thoughts.
and I agree with you in the sense, especially when you talk of artificial intelligence, that it opens room for questioning as well. Um, but having said that, the disbelievers will disbelieve, and those who choose not to accept will not accept. And if the method can be improved by using technology that we have, a true communication, a real communication, we should not eliminate the use of it because of the negationists. But yeah, I agree that it does open room for question, especially with artificial intelligence now. It is a problem that has to go to resolve in the next 50 years or so.
Thank you.
Elmo, hi, Carol here.
Yes, Carol?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, just kind of digressing just a tad. Yes, many years ago I had followed this futurist called, his name was Gordon Michael Scallion. He wrote also from a keyboard. He was a scientist, geologist, and also he discussed quite remarkably the Earth changes, which of course we now know quite definitively about. Anyway, I just wanted to verify and validate that Gordon Michael Scallion did use his computer, his laptop, or his keyboard. So there you go.
There we go. That's right. I mean, I'm sure that, especially in outside of spiritualism, in spiritualism, there will be lots of evidences of of mediums making use of the keyboard instead of pen and pencil. And again, why not? Right? There is no reason to believe that that's not possible. Now, the point that is brought over here that it opens room for fraud. I think so in case of artificial intelligence. But let's say a few years back, even before computers only used to have a typewriter, there is no reason to have any suspicion, right? Now with the artificial intelligence, you could start to imagine things. So it is possible. I'm sure that it happens, and you and Fabio already gave evidence that has happened and is probably is happening. And another thing to question also, I mean, are some of those books, everything that's written there does not have, perhaps not the entire book, but degree of mediumship involved in it, right? One time, Chico Xavier put a question up there if most of the writers were not medium themselves, which was an answer that produced in Pinga Fogo when he was challenged about his mediumship. And I think Fabio illustrated that point also, that some writers may have an ostensive mediumship, up not even knowing that they have an ostensive mediumship, and they receive some parts of whole books from an spirit from an spirit in a mediumistic phenomena, and they don't even know that that's the case. It's very possible. And then they will use whatever they use. They use a typewriter, they use a computer, they use a pen and pencil, anything that they are comfortable with using. Now, and I bring again, in the case of the unconscious medium, the spirit to use the keyboard would have to be somewhat familiar with that keyboard. And this has happened again with physical phenomena of electrical instruments being used by spirits in physical phenomena. I thank everyone for the discussion. I really enjoyed it. And Carrie, can you give us final prayer?
Oh, yes, certainly. Thank you very much, Almo, for hosting for us today. And thank you, Sarita, for reading. We appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for being here and attending. Infinite Creator and Supreme Intelligence, we give thanks to be together again as brothers and sisters for our studies of the Medium's book. Medium's book being Chapter 11, Sematology and Typtology. Our earliest intelligent physical manifestations occurred through raps and typtology, also through yes or no answers, and also by alphabetical knocks. This took effort, time, energy, and dedication by the mediums and the workers. These manifestations drew attention to our physical senses. Special mechanics and internal typtology are subject to questioning and fraud. There has been no need to apparently complicate the communication process. Every language is equally good for receiving quality communications with a positive objective. Today, mediums of psychography can bring more eloquent communications. We give thanks to our spiritual benefactors and the good spirits for guiding and inspiring us today. May we receive the love, light, and peace of Christ within us and for our loved ones, our teachers, our directors, our counselors, our mediums, our workers, and all participants. We pray for inner peace, and especially now for world peace and for those who are suffering in the physical and spiritual worlds. We pray for our center, SGNY, and all Spiritus centers throughout the world, that they may grow, prosper, expand, and be protected throughout the day and throughout the night. As we close, we humbly ask for safety and protection as we return to our family, our friends, loved ones, and co-workers. And may we remind ourselves as we go forth to be beacons of love, of light, of peace, of service, and charity, which is love in action. May peace and love prevail. So be it.
So be it.